The auctioneer's gavel slammed down with the finality of thunder, and Cordelia Whitmore felt her knees buckle as the words echoed across the dusty town square of Redemption Falls. Sold to Mr. Beauregard Ashworth for $75. The rope around her wrists burned as she was yanked forward, her 3-year-old triplets, Jasper, Mercy, and Little Temperance, clinging to her weathered calico skirt. The crowd of weathered faces blurred through her tears, but she held her chin high. She wouldn't give these vultures the satisfaction of seeing her completely broken. "Come along, woman," Ashworth's gravelly voice cut through the morning air. His tobacco-stained fingers gripped her elbow with bruising force. "Time to earn your keep." Cordelia had known this day would come ever since they'd found her husband Matthias face down in Miller's Creek, his gambling debts written in blood across his back. The town's creditors had circled like buzzards, and her meager possessions, the cabin, the few head of cattle, even her wedding ring, hadn't been enough to settle what he owed. As Ashworth dragged her toward his wagon, a shadow fell across their path. The auctioneer stopped mid-sentence, his hammer frozen in the air. The crowd fell silent, a hush so complete that Cordelia could hear her own heartbeat. She looked up to see a man unlike any she'd ever encountered. Tall as a pine and silent as morning mist, he sat astride a paint horse that seemed carved from sunset itself. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, adorned with a single eagle feather, and his bronze skin spoke of desert sun and mountain wind. But it was his eyes that stopped her, breath deep as canyon pools and burning with something she couldn't name. "Nalnish," he said, his voice low and melodic, speaking in a tongue that made her skin prickle with strange recognition. Ashworth's grip tightened. "Move along, Apache. This don't concern you." The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, his moccasined feet making no sound on the hard-packed earth. From a leather pouch at his hip, he produced a handful of silver coins that caught the morning light like falling stars. $100, he said in perfect English, his accent carrying the cadence of wind through canyon walls. The crowd gasped. Ashworth's face purpled. "Now see here, savage, 150. The Apache's voice never rose, but something in it made Ashworth step back. He counted out the coins with deliberate precision, placing them on the auctioneer's table. With soft metallic clicks, Cordelia stared at this mysterious savior, her heart hammering against her ribs. Why would he pay such a sum for her? What did he want? The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously. "Well, that is to say the higher bid takes precedence, ... This is an outrage." Ashworth sputtered, but his protest died when the Apache turned those burning eyes on him. Something passed between them, a promise or a warning, and Ashworth backed away, muttering curses under his breath. "The woman and children go to ... double quotes." The auctioneer fumbled with his papers. "Kale night wind," the Apache said, his gaze never leaving. Cordelia's face as he approached. The triplets pressed closer to their mother's legs, but showed no fear, only wide-eyed curiosity. Cale knelt before them, his movements careful and non-threatening. From his saddlebags, he produced 3 small carved animals, a horse, a wolf, and an eagle. "For the little ones," he said softly, offering the toys. Jasper, ever the brave one, stepped forward first to accept the carved horse. Mercy and Temperance quickly followed, their tiny fingers tracing the intricate details of their gifts. Cale rose and gently cut the rope's binding. Cordelia's wrist with a knife that appeared and disappeared like magic. His fingers brushed her chafed skin, and she felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with pain. "You are free," he said simply, but his eyes suggested that freedom might be more complicated than either of them expected. Cordelia rode behind Cale on his paint horse, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance, the triplets secured in front of him in a makeshift sling he'd fashioned from blankets. The rhythmic movement of the horse and the warmth of his body against her back created an intimacy that both terrified and comforted her. "Where are you taking us?" she finally found the courage to ask as they left the dusty streets of Redemption. "Falls behind." "Somewhere safe," was all he said, but his voice carried a promise that made her chest tight with unexpected hope. They rode for hours, through rolling hills dotted with mesquite and sage, following trails that seemed invisible to her untrained eye. As the sun reached its zenith, Cale guided them to a hidden valley where a crystal stream wound between cottonwood trees. A modest cabin sat nestled against the canyon wall, smoke curling from its chimney. "This is your home?" Cordelia asked as he helped her down from the horse. "Our home," he corrected, the word hanging between them like a bridge neither had yet crossed. An elderly Apache woman emerged from the cabin, her silver hair braided with turquoise beads. She spoke rapidly to Cale in their native tongue, gesturing toward Cordelia and the children with animated concern. "Ayanna says you look like a ghost that's forgotten how to haunt properly," Cale translated with the ghost of a smile. "She wants to feed you." Despite everything, Cordelia found herself laughing, the first genuine laugh she'd managed since Matthias died. "Tell her I'm grateful." As Ayanna bustled the triplets inside, chattering in a mixture of Apache and broken English, Cordelia found herself alone with her enigmatic rescuer. In the dappled shade of the cottonwoods, she studied his face properly for the first time. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, and those eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Why?" she asked simply. Cale was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he spoke, his voice soft as wind through grass. 3 moons ago, I had a vision. A woman with hair like flame and children like 3 young eagles, trapped by the greed of lesser men." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "The spirits told me to wait, to watch, to be ready." "You don't even know me," Cordelia protested, though her heart was beating too fast. "I know you fought like a wildcat when they put those ropes on you. I know you shielded your children with your body when the crowd pressed close. I know you've been surviving on nothing but stubborn will and love for 3 months." His dark eyes met hers. "That's enough." From inside the cabin came the sound of children's laughter, the first she'd heard from her babies since their father died. Mercy's giggle rang out clear as church bells, followed by Temperance's delighted squeal and Jasper's deeper chuckle. The sound cracked something open in Cordelia's chest. "They like her," she said, tears threatening. "Ayanna raised 7 grandchildren after their parents died of the spotted fever," Cale said gently. "She's been lonely since the last one took a wife and moved to his own lodge. And you? Are you lonely too?" The question escaped before she could stop it, making her cheeks burn. Cale stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to smell the sage and leather scent of his skin. "I was," he said simply. "Until today." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Cordelia had been married to Matthias for 6 years, had borne his children, had mourned his death, but she'd never felt anything like the pull she felt toward this quiet Apache who'd bought her freedom with silver and offered her something far more precious, hope. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "Neither do I," Cale admitted, his hand rising to almost but not quite touch her cheek. "But the spirits rarely explain themselves. They only show us the path." The first week at Cale's hidden valley passed like a fever dream. Cordelia found herself caught between gratitude and confusion, watching her mysterious protector with growing fascination and fear. He moved through his daily routines with quiet efficiency, tending his horses, checking snares, maintaining the cabin, while she struggled to find her place in this strange new world. "Mama, look!" Jasper's excited voice drew her attention to where the boy was following Cale around the corral, mimicking the man's movements as he groomed a paint horse. Mercy and Temperance sat nearby, weaving grass stems under Ayana's patient guidance, their blonde heads bent in concentration. In just 1 week, her children had found peace again. The haunted look had left their eyes, replaced by the natural curiosity of 3-year-olds discovering wonder in every corner of their new home. But Cordelia herself felt more unsettled each day. "You're thinking too hard." Cale's voice came from behind her, low and amused. She startled, spinning to face him. "I didn't hear you approach." "Apache trick," he said, with that almost smile that made her stomach flutter. "What troubles you, Cordelia Whitmore?" Hearing her full name on his lips sent an unwelcome thrill through her. "Everything," she said honestly. "I don't understand what you expect from me. What this arrangement is supposed to be." Cale was quiet, for a moment, studying her face. Then he gestured toward a fallen log beside the stream. "Sit with me." She hesitated, then settled beside him on the smooth wood, careful to maintain distance between them. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, and the sound of water over stones filled the silence. "My grandmother used to say that some debts can only be paid in freedom," Cale began, his voice taking on the cadence of storytelling. "Your husband's debts were paid in silver, but the debt to your spirit that required something different, I still don't understand. When I was 12, white soldiers came to our village. They took children to their schools to make them forget they were Apache." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I ran, hid in the mountains for 3 months, eating roots and drinking rainwater." Cordelia's breath caught. She'd heard stories of the Indian schools, whispered rumors that made her skin crawl. "An old mountain man found me, more dead than alive." Daniel Calloway hair red as fire, beard down to his chest. "He could have turned me in for the bounty, but instead he nursed me back to health. Taught me English, taught me to read." Cale picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his fingers. "Never asked for anything in return. Just said some debts could only be paid forward." The pieces began to click into place in Cordelia's mind. "So you're paying it forward?" "Partly." Cale met her eyes, and the intensity there made her pulse quicken. "But not entirely. The vision was real, Cordelia. I've been waiting for you specifically." "That's impossible." "Is it?" He stood, extending his hand to help her up. "Come, there's something I want to show you." Against her better judgment, she took his hand, feeling calluses and strength in his grip. He led her to a narrow path she hadn't noticed before, winding up the canyon wall through juniper and pinyon pine. The climb was steep but manageable, and soon they emerged onto a flat outcropping that offered a breathtaking view of the entire valley. But it wasn't the view that stole her breath. It was the paintings, covering the smooth rock wall behind them, were ancient petroglyphs, spirals, and animals, human figures and symbols she couldn't identify. But in one corner, clearly newer than the rest, was an image that made her knees weak. A woman with long hair, 3 small figures beside her, and a man with a feather in his hair. Below them, symbols that seemed to dance with meaning even though she couldn't read them. "How?" she whispered. "I painted it after the vision," Cale said quietly. 3 months ago, the day your husband died." Cordelia stared at the ancient wall, at this impossible prophecy made real, and felt her carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. That night, Cordelia lay awake on her pallet in the cabin's main room, listening to her children's soft breathing and the whisper of wind through the canyon walls. Across the room, she could hear Cale's steady breathing from his own sleeping area, separated by a hanging blanket that Ayana had strung for propriety. The petroglyphs haunted her thoughts. How could he have painted her image 3 months ago? How could he have known about the children, about her hair, about any of it? Her rational mind rejected the impossibility of it all, but her heart, her treacherous heart, whispered that some things existed beyond reason. A soft sound made her freeze. Footsteps, barely audible, moving away from Cale's sleeping area toward the door. She held her breath as she heard the door open and close with barely a whisper of sound. Unable to resist her curiosity, Cordelia slipped from her blankets and padded to the window. In the moonlight, she could see Cale walking toward the stream, his movements fluid as water itself. He wore only buckskin leggings, his chest bare in the silver light, and something about his posture spoke of deep sadness. Before she could think better of it, she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and slipped outside. The night air was cool against her skin as she followed the sound of his voice. He was singing a low, haunting melody in Apache that seemed to blend with the night. Wind. The song was beautiful and heartbreaking. Filled with a longing that made her chest ache, she found him sitting on the bank of the stream, his face turned up to the star-scattered sky. In the moonlight, he looked like something carved from legend ancient, and powerful and utterly alone. "Couldn't sleep either?" she said softly. He didn't startle, as if he'd sensed her approach. "The old songs help sometimes," he said simply. "When the spirits are restless." "What were you singing about?" She settled beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance. "Loss, love that comes too late, the price of waiting." His dark eyes found hers in the moonlight. "My people believe that souls choose their paths before birth, that we're drawn to certain people, certain places, certain moments that shape our destiny. Do you believe that?" "I didn't, until I saw you in that vision." He was quiet for a moment, then continued, "I've been alone for a long time, Cordelia. My wife died of the fever 6 winters ago. We had no children, and I thought my path was to remain solitary, to serve my people as a scout, a hunter, nothing more." The revelation that he'd been married sent an unexpected pang through her chest. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Nayeli was a good woman, kind, gentle. We were matched by our families when we were young." He picked up a smooth stone, skipping it across the moonlit water. "I cared for her, respected her. But I never felt the fire the old stories speak of, never felt my spirit call to hers." Cordelia's heart began beating faster. "And now?" Cale turned to face her fully, his expression intense in the silver light. "Now I understand why the spirits made me wait. Why they showed me your face in dreams for 3 months before I ever saw you in flesh." The space between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Cordelia felt pulled toward him like iron to a magnet, but fear held her back. "Cale, I know you're frightened," he said gently. "I know this all seems impossible. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. But I want you to know what I feel for you, what drew me to that auction. It's deeper than debt or duty or even prophecy." "What are you saying?" He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her cheek. His palm was warm and calloused, and she found herself leaning into the contact despite every rational thought screaming at her to maintain distance. "I'm saying that my heart chose you before my mind even knew you existed," he whispered. "And if you'll let me, I want to spend whatever time the spirits grant us proving that some bonds transcend reason." The morning brought unexpected visitors to their peaceful valley. Cordelia was helping Ayanna prepare breakfast when the sound of approaching horses sent Cale moving swiftly to the window, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. "Riders," he said tersely. 3 of them. Through the glass, Cordelia saw dust clouds rising from the canyon entrance. Her blood turned cold when she recognized the lead rider, Beauregard Ashworth, flanked by 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. "Inside now," Cale ordered, but his voice was calm despite the steel in it. "Take the children to the back room." "Mama?" Jasper's voice was small, picking up on the tension that suddenly filled the cabin. "It's all right, sweetheart," Cordelia said, though her hand shook as she gathered the triplets. "We're just going to play a quiet game in the back room." As she herded the children away, she heard Cale speaking rapidly to Ayanna in Apache. The older woman's face grew grave as she nodded, then disappeared into what Cordelia assumed was a hiding place for weapons. The riders' voices grew louder as they approached the cabin. Ashworth's tobacco-roughened bellow carried clearly through the morning air. "I know you're in there, Apache. You've got something that belongs to me." Cale stepped onto the porch, moving with that fluid grace that never failed to mesmerize Cordelia. Even facing down three armed men, he showed no fear, no tension, just a deadly stillness that was somehow more threatening than any show of aggression. "The woman was sold legally at public auction," he said, his voice carrying clearly. "I paid more than your bid. She belongs to no one but herself now." Ashworth spat into the dust. "Them papers weren't worth the parchment they was written on. That woman's husband owed me more than just money. He owed me satisfaction for cheating at cards and making a fool of me in front of the whole town." From the back room, Cordelia felt her blood run cold. She'd known about Matthias's gambling debts, but she'd never known he'd been cheating. The shame of it burned in her chest. "Your quarrel was with a dead man," Cale replied evenly. "It dies with him." "Like hell it does." Ashworth's voice turned ugly. "That woman's gonna work off every penny he owed, plus interest for the trouble. And them brats of hers will make good servants once they're old enough." The threat to her children snapped something inside Cordelia. Before she could think, she was moving, pushing past the triplets despite their frightened calls, emerging from the back room with fire in her eyes. "Over my dead body," she snarled, stepping onto the porch beside Cale. His jaw tightened, but he didn't order her back inside. Instead, he moved slightly, positioning himself so he could protect her while still facing the threat. "Well, well," Ashworth leered, his eyes raking over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "There's the little dove. Come along, sweetheart. Time to pay what's owed." "She owes you nothing." Cale's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, but it carried a menace that made even the rough men flanking Ashworth shift nervously in their saddles. "You killed her husband," Cordelia said suddenly, the certainty hitting her like lightning. "Matthias didn't just die. You murdered him." Ashworth's face went pale, then flushed red with rage. "You can't prove nothing." "Maybe not," Cale said quietly, "but I can ensure you don't harm anyone else." What happened next was so fast Cordelia could barely follow it. Cale moved like liquid shadow, a throwing knife appearing in his hand as if by magic. The blade whistled through the air, pinning Ashworth's gun hand to his saddle horn before the man could clear leather. Ashworth's howl of pain and rage echoed off the canyon walls as his horse danced beneath him, spooked by the scent of blood. His two companions reached for their weapons, but found themselves facing Ayanna, who had emerged from the cabin holding an ancient but well-maintained rifle with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. "Now," Cale said conversationally, as if he hadn't just demonstrated deadly accuracy with a thrown blade, "I suggest you gentlemen ride out of here while you still can." The confrontation with Ashworth changed something fundamental between Cordelia and Cale, as she helped him clean the minor cut on his knuckles earned when he'd retrieved his knife from him. Ashworth's now vacated saddle, she felt the last of her reservations crumble away. "You could have killed him," she said softly, dabbing at the wound with a damp cloth. "I could have," Cale agreed, his dark eyes steady on her face. "But killing creates ghosts that never rest. Better to let him live, with the knowledge that he's not welcome in this valley." The tenderness in his voice, the way he'd protected not just her, but her children without hesitation, the quiet strength he carried like a second skin, all of it overwhelmed her careful defenses. "Why?" she whispered, and this time the question carried different weight. Not why had he bought her, but why did he make her feel safe for the first time in years? Why did his touch set her skin on fire? Why did she dream of his hands in her hair and wake with her heart pounding? Cale's fingers stilled under her ministrations. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his free hand to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Because you're the missing piece I never knew I was searching for," he said simply. "Because when I look at you, I see home." The space between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. Cordelia found herself leaning into his touch, her own hand, rising to cover his where it rested against her face. "I've never felt anything like this," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "With Matthias, it was ... duty. Comfort, maybe, but this ... She trailed off, unable to find words for the fire that burned between them. "This is what the old songs speak of," Cale said, his voice rough with barely contained longing. "The recognition of one soul by another." Outside, they could hear the triplets playing with Ayanna, their laughter bright in the afternoon air. Inside the cabin, time seemed suspended, crystallized around this moment of perfect understanding. "I'm scared," Cordelia admitted. "Of me?" "Of this, of feeling so much so quickly, of losing control." Her eyes searched his face, memorizing every line and angle. "Of losing this if it turns out to be a dream." Cale's thumb traced her lower lip with infinite gentleness. "Then let me prove it's real." He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Cordelia found herself rising to meet him, her eyes fluttering closed as their lips touched for the first time. The kiss was gentle at first, reverent, like a prayer offered to something sacred. But as Cordelia's hands fisted in the soft buckskin of his shirt, as she pressed closer to the solid warmth of his chest, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of hunger held too long in check. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cale rested his forehead against hers. "Cordelia," he whispered, her name a benediction on his lips. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy, but I love you." His sharp intake of breath made her panic. Had she said too much? Revealed too much too quickly? But then his arms tightened around her, and she felt him trembling. This strong, steady man who faced down armed thugs without flinching was shaking in her arms. "Say it again," he said hoarsely. "I love you, Cale Nightwind," she repeated, tears. She hadn't realized she was crying streaming down her cheeks. "I love your kindness and your strength and the way you make my children laugh. I love your songs in the moonlight and your hands on my skin and the way you see straight into my soul." "Beloved," he breathed in Apache, then in English. "My heart, my soul, my everything. I have loved you since before I knew your name." Their second kiss tasted of tears and promises, of a future neither had dared to hope for and a love that defied every reasonable explanation. 6 months later, Cordelia woke to the sound of her husband's voice singing softly in Apache, the melody drifting through the morning air like incense. Her husband. The word still sent a thrill through her every time she thought it. Their wedding had been a blend of Apache tradition and frontier practicality, officiated by a circuit preacher who'd been brave enough to venture into the canyon, and blessed by Ayanna with sage smoke and prayers in the old tongue. Cordelia had worn a dress of white doeskin that the Apache women had spent weeks preparing, adorned with turquoise and silver that caught the light like captured sky. But it was the moment when Cale had taken her hands and spoken his vows in both languages that had truly sealed their union. "Before the spirits and the earth and sky, I claim you as my heart's companion," he'd said, his dark eyes blazing with love and promise. "Until the stars fall from the heavens and the rivers run backward, you are mine and I am yours." Now, heavy. With their first child together, she rose carefully from their bed and padded to the window. In the yard below, Cale was working with the triplets, now 4 years old and brown as berries from their life in the valley. Jasper was attempting to braid rope under Cale's patient guidance, while Mercy and Temperance took turns riding his paint horse in careful circles. The sight never failed to fill her with wonder. Her children adored their stepfather with a devotion that spoke of genuine love rather than mere gratitude. He'd become papa to them naturally, teaching them to track and hunt, to read the sky for weather, to move silently through the forest. But more than that, he'd taught them that they were worthy of love, that their lives had value beyond their ability to serve others. "Mama," Temperance's voice carried up to the window. "Come see. I can make Painted Cloud walk backward." "In a moment, sweetheart," Cordelia called down, one hand resting on her rounded belly. The baby kicked vigorously, as if eager to join the family activities. She'd feared, in those early days, that the child might be a source of division-proof. Of her complete commitment to this new life when the triplets were reminders of her old one. But Cale had dismissed her worries with characteristic directness. "This child will be brother or sister to Jasper, Mercy, and Temperance," he'd said firmly. "Blood of your blood, heart of your heart. Any child of yours is a child of mine, whether born to us together or brought to us by different paths." A soft knock on the bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Cale entered carrying a steaming mug of the ginger tea that helped with her morning sickness. His hair was longer now, reaching past his shoulders, and he'd taken to wearing it loose except when working with the horses. He moved to her side, setting the tea on the windowsill before wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands settling over hers on her belly. "How are you feeling this morning, beloved?" "Full of wonder," she said honestly, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. That you're real." "The baby certainly seems real," Cale chuckled as their child delivered another vigorous kick. "Active little one. Just like his or her father," Cordelia teased. "Remember how you couldn't sit still when we were first married?" "I was trying not to overwhelm you with my attentions," Cale said, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot behind her ear that never failed to make her shiver. "Though I seem to recall you complaining about my restraint." She hummed, tilting her head to give him better access. "Best decision I ever made, demanding you stop treating me like spun glass." Their laughter was interrupted by Ayana's voice from below, calling in Apache. Cale translated automatically. "She says breakfast is ready, and if we don't come down soon, she's feeding our share to the horses." "We can't have that," Cordelia said, though she made no move to step away from his embrace. Below them, their children's laughter rang out bright and free, and Cordelia knew that whatever debts had once bound her, she had found something infinitely more valuable, a love that had transformed them all, and a future bright with possibility.